Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the program. Today we are going to talk about ancient viruses or ancient retroviruses and how the placenta evolved from them and how that may have had a larger influence on human history and the course of how humans either evolved or came to be. Now, this is a really controversial topic, of course, because it involves evolution and evolutionary theory. But it's kind of hard to deny that viruses themselves exist. Now, everything else from how they influence us to how they take over cells to how they literally hijack organisms and start influencing to varying degrees their behavior patterns and thought processes and all that stuff. All that is still in a huge gray area. So as we proceed, just remember to keep in mind that this is all just throwing thoughts out there. These are all ideas that are out there now. I mentioned this before. I'm not married to anything. Again, one of the main reasons that this channel exists is to put these ideas out there and discuss them and to sort them out and get everybody's feedback on them and how they feel, whether they agree or disagree. So throw that out there before we start talking about this, because again, it does get into there are a lot of assumptions that are thrown around here and there, and I'll try to point them out as we go through them. And there's a lot of where's the proof for that, or I need to see some evidence for that, and that's fine. But just be aware of that and try to suspend that for a little bit as you read this. Now, it's not. I'm making it sound like it's super far fetched. It's not. It's actually really thought provoking. And when compared to other cultural interpretations of the placenta and how various tribes and various peoples all throughout history treated the placenta, especially after the birth, is very interesting, to say the least. And then when we talk about scripture and superstitions and religion, all of these things, as well as ancient history and education, it's very interesting to entertain this idea, especially because viruses has been largely an invisible thing in Western science for a while. So anyway, I'm kind of bearing the lead here. This is from Dr. Coulihan, I think. She's the person giving this interview. She describes it as an alien meat cake, and you guys can just go Google placenta. It's like this purplish weird thing. If you guys haven't seen it, it looks like it should be pulsating because it looks like it landed here from another planet, and that's a common theme with the placenta. Is it looks alien? It's nothing that we've ever seen in the Earth. It's such a weird thing. It's got to be either a blessing from God or like a higher intelligence or all of these different things. So it's interesting to see that it came from an ancient retrovirus, which is very interesting. Some quick facts about it, though. It's the only temporary organ out of all the human organs. It serves multiple functions. So it serves as a baby's lung. It's a waste disposal system. It's a nutrition source. It keeps two genetically different human beings. It allows them to grow, and it prevents the mother's body from rejecting it and destroying the baby. It's almost like this mediator between two different nodes of life or nodes of consciousness, so to speak. Something no other tissue can do, essentially. So it's very unique. Again, the pregnancy can go on for 9 months without the mom's body destroying it. It's an incredible gatekeeper. It has to let oxygen and nutrients get to the baby, and it has to let carbon dioxide and waste get out. So it's a facilitator for life, essentially. Moving on, the placenta we think of as a defining characteristic of live-bearing animals. So, or mammals rather. So primates, rodents, dogs, cats, they all have a placenta, right? This is all part of their reproductive process. It is estimated to have evolved about 150 million to 200 million years ago. Okay, so this is one of those points in the discussion where you have to point out assumptions and evidence, right? This particular article doesn't get into that forest, that line of inquiry. But the thing with viruses is they don't really leave fossils. It's really hard to figure out when they came about. But I think what makes most sense to me after having looked into the subject it makes sense that ever since there has been cellular cells, essentially living cells, it seems like viruses had to have not been far behind, if not concurrently, because their main way of survival is through cells. There are a few theories of that, and let's just go into them now. So, first of all, the etymology of viruses is derived from the Latin meaning poisonous. So, right from the get-go, in terms of recorded history, viruses have always been this negative, deteriorating, corrosive thing. So there are three main theories about them. So there's a regressive hypothesis, which states viruses may have once been small cells that parasitize larger cells. So they were initially cells, and then eventually they turned and became parasites. Cellular origin hypothesis. Some viruses may have evolved from bits of DNA and RNA that escaped from the genes of a larger organism. So again, and it's interesting to connect these to the story of Satan in the Bible, or Lucifer. If you guys are know about that, Lucifer kind of breaks off and does his own thing. This is kind of like an allegory for that. There's some sort of parallel there between these two hypotheses. And that's just off the top of my head. And then there's the coevolution hypothesis, which proposes that viruses evolved from other complex molecules of protein and nucleic acid concurrent with the living cells that first appeared on Earth. And then eventually they developed this parasite relationship with cells. No matter how you slice it, viruses are really misunderstood to this day. I'm sure we don't know that much about them, except we do know that they can lead to widespread illness. Like someone left a comment about the coronavirus, and the coronavirus is not just one thing. I mean, I think there are a bunch of different, like SARS is a type of coronavirus, if I'm not mistaken, and corona basically refers to the structure of the virus. So anyway, we know that their viruses are really deadly and very mysterious at the same time. So anyway, sorry for that tangent. So here's some other stuff that was interesting. Before placentas, a baby had to be in an eggshell. So basically, that's what a yolk is. It's a care package that has to last the embryo till it's born. And then instead of that, eventually mammals switched over to the placenta. Now, why that happened is anyone's guess, but this is one of those theories about why the placenta, somewhat like after the Cambrian explosion and all that stuff, not even the Cambrian explosion, I'm sorry, like after when dinosaurs allegedly died, and then we had the rise of like the shrew and then the mammals and all that stuff. From that point on, they all had placentas. So it could either be extraterrestrials, or it could be just simple evolution. There's a bunch of different theories, but here's one of them. So the evolution of the placenta essentially involved losing that eggshell and instead replacing that with some sort of tissue or organ that attaches to the mother's uterus during development. It had to separate the maternal and fetal bloodstreams, and that was kind of its niche as an organ, even though it does a bunch of other things. And then so there's a cell layer called I don't know how to pronounce that, syncytiotrophoblasts. It's basically like a wall, essentially. It's a wall that is a layer of cells that are fused together. And then from there, it starts doing its thing. It starts being a placenta, essentially. So they mapped the genomes of these cells, and then they found that the protein called syncytin, I think that's how you say it. I don't know. This is one of those things you read all the time but don't really say. And so they found that this protein is a huge component in the placenta. Okay, so they think that the protein came from an ancient retrovirus. Okay, so again, that's why without that thing there would be no placenta, and that thing comes from the ancient retrovirus. That's the long and short of it, essentially. So again, viruses are little strips of biological information. Now, this is where, when you start digging into what viruses are, it starts to get biblical. You start to think about superstitions and culture and what they think either evil spirits are, or all these ethereal or invisible forces that influence people either in a good way or a bad way. So it's these little strips of information that hijack the cell's machinery, makes copies of themselves, so they replicate and they move on, infect other cells, and it's been like that for time immemorial. The host is then stuck with viral DNA for the rest of his life, and it can never stop doing what the virus wants. So at some point, some retrovirus, basically the one responsible for the placenta, infected an egg-laying vertebrate. This is a theory, okay? This is a theory. And by chance, that virus settled into that animal's egg cells, and it just so happened that that particular infected egg met a nice sperm and got fertilized. Okay, so that was essentially the host for this retrovirus, and that went on to have another baby. Basically, you can call it a proto-mammal if you want. And then now that proto-mammal has copies of that DNA, and then that's how it starts, essentially. And it's interesting to hear the scientists describe it as a premium feature for the offspring, so they got an upgrade. Okay, so if you were to ask someone who believes the ancient alien hypothesis, or maybe not even that, just someone who doesn't think it's out of the realm of possibility that ETs could have come in and messed with our genome, this would be the way to do it, right? You would introduce a virus, right? It leaves very little traced in terms of like ancient humans. I'm assuming that they didn't know viruses existed in this way. Now that's an assumption, but I just don't think that they might have known about it the way we know about it. Then again, that's where the Bible imagery and symbolism and stuff comes in. They may have been referring to the same thing in different language. Anyway, so now this viral DNA is amongst pretty much every mammal. They don't need to lay eggs, and they can now make a protein that fuses things. So the virus is morphed or evolved into what we now know as syncytin. This protein gives baby the ability to fuse cells into a wall, the placenta, and connects mom and baby. Okay, so it seems like a very specific thing that it does. The virus helped that mammalian ancestor survive better by giving it a better placenta. Okay, so that seems like intelligent design, right? If you were to ask somebody. So what the question becomes, okay, who was the intelligence? Was it God? Was it the universe? Was it happenstance? Was it just the natural evolution of the universe? Is this just a path? Was it just time? After a certain amount of time, this just happens. Again, these are all questions that I think can't be answered right now, but might be answerable in the future. This process we think of as a molecular domestication of an ancient retrovirus element. And this retroviral element continues to be important for placental development in modern humans. Probably took many more generations worth of mutations. Biologists have found huge chunks of our DNA that are actually remnants of ancient viral infections. So are some of these upgrades, again, I use this example all the time, that like the altitude gene that the ancient Tibetans have that inherited from the Denisovans, was that some sort of mutation that was by chance, or did people have to live in a certain condition in order to be eligible for that quote upgrade? And is that linked to a virus? We're not sure. Maybe all of our genetic upgrades are linked to a virus. That's something to think about. All these invisible influences around us all the time. That's why stuff like simple adages like "you are what you eat." You look at those in a completely different light. Have viruses been domesticating us, or have we been domesticating viruses? So again, that's a very, very interesting thing to think about. So now that I've kind of went at length about this, let's look at some of the cultural parallels here, or what some cultures think of the placenta. In the Western world, the placenta is most often incinerated. Okay, so it's just burned. There's no use, and it's outlived its use, and it's gone, right? And now that I think about it, the placenta as some separate thing, like a virus. Same thing with the mitochondria too. The mitochondria, I feel like, is just another one of those upgrades that we got. Some cultures bury the placenta for various reasons. So the Maori Navajo, Cambodia, and Costa Rica. They believe it protects and ensures the health of the baby and the mother. Okay, a lot of these have to do with a lot of their view of the placenta has to do with the mother and baby, obviously, and also having an influence on them. The Aymara of Bolivia believed the placenta, burying it in a secret place so the mother's spirit will not return to claim her baby's life. That type of stuff. And in some communities, they believe it has the power over the lives of the babies or its parents. So the Kwakiutl of British Columbia bury girls' placentas to give the girl skill in digging clams, expose boys' placentas to ravens to encourage future prophetic vision. So again, this idea of influencing their life. The virus helps incubate them, and then once it's done, it no longer serves its physical purpose, but now there's this invisible purpose, this influence of guiding the baby's life throughout its childhood into its old age. Very interesting stuff. In Turkey, it promotes devoutness in the child later in life. Transylvania and Japan influence the parent's future fertility. So again, it's been thought for a while that the placenta had some sort of supernatural influence on people. Here it gets even more interesting. Several cultures believe the placenta to be or have been alive, often relative of the baby. So they're pretty spot on there, right? It's a virus. It's its own thing. Now, are viruses alive or dead? That's debatable right there, right? But I mean, some ancient people had an inclination to believe that it was alive. And when you look at the thing, it's kind of hard not to think that. Nepalese think the placenta is a friend of the baby. Malaysian Orang Asli regard it as the baby's older sibling. So again, it's got its own consciousness almost, a friend of the baby, an older sibling. It's like its own autonomous thing. Native Hawaiians believe that the placenta is a part of the baby, and they plant it with the tree that can then grow alongside the child. Cultures in Indonesia, such as Javanese, believe the placenta is a spirit and needs to be buried outside the family house. So again, this idea of a spirit, again, this supernatural, invisible thing that has an influence constantly in everyday human life. And then, of course, in some cultures, they eat the placenta. Even in Western culture, in China, they call the dried placenta a purple river car, which is thought to be healthful, restorative, and used in traditional Chinese medicine. Very interesting stuff. So have viruses always been this constant thing that's shaping the course of human history? You think about stair-step ideas, the stair-step technology, right? We have irrigation, or we have agriculture, and then irrigation, and then before that we have fire, right? And then everything's flat for a while, and then we have another spike. That's if you think of ideas as a virus themselves. They have very similar properties where ideas inhabit different hosts. Well, maybe that is just some form of virus. Maybe the virus is just like the physical manifestation of that viral property that also exists in ideas such as memes. When a meme goes viral, that means it's inhabited a bunch of people's consciousness at one point, usually in a short amount of time. So are we scratching the surface of something deeper here? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and let me know what else you guys know about viruses, about other cultures and their view on the viruses. I would be very interested to know. All your comments have been fire lately, so I love reading them. All the positive ones, anyway. And just before I go, I am going to interview the Grimerica boys on Thursday, in a couple of days from now. So if there's anything you want me to ask them, let me know in the comments, or you can hit them up and ask them what they want, what you want them to ask me. I don't know, like it could be reciprocated that way. But yeah, let me know, and I'll talk to you guys later.